It's time to get into Bold Predictions Revisited. This is part 3. We've done this the last few shows. It's gotten great reviews. I've loved it. This was back from August. I took a bunch of bold predictions from you guys. I said, hey, give me something you believe in enough to bet your money on, and I'll give you a 1 to 10 grade of boldness, but we'll save them. We'll bookmark all of them. We'll come back to them. Well, here it is. I'm going to blow your mind with one of them. So this is not it. The first one's not it. The first one is from Ryan. Ryan said, Arkansas will lead the country in rushing this year. They did at the Power 5 level last year. I called this a 5. I didn't think it was that bold. My revised boldness would be about a 6. They finished 4th in Power 5. So they weren't far off. I needed KJ Jefferson to stay healthy all year. He did not. I couldn't have seen that coming, nor could Ryan. You know, my thinking was they were bringing most of the guys back that put those numbers up for them last year, and they were losing Burks, a first-round caliber wide receiver, to the draft. So if anything, more incentive to run the ball. And they did good, 223.4 per game. So, you know, that's, I mean, what are we looking at here? We're looking at service academies and then Ole Miss at 261 per game. You know, that would have been a good prop bet, actually. Arkansas, will they even lead the SEC West in yards per game? Interesting. As it turns out, they would not have. But they were still 4th overall if you just go by Power 5 programs, you know, non-service academy. And so I'm going to call that one a 6. Revised 6. Okay, this next one is crazy. I got to take a sip before this next one. Listen to this. You want to talk, any of you out there who believe college football is fixed or it's rigged, I think you're crazy, but I advise you to use this in the future as part of your ammunition in your argument. Football Enjoyer predicted, you see the date down there, July 31st. He said the Big 12 title game will be Kansas State versus someone not named Oklahoma or Texas. Your Big 12 championship game ended up being Kansas State versus Texas Christian University. What were they preseason? Odds-wise, they were the 5th and 6th best odds, respectively, to win the Big 12. So it's not quite like the year before where we had Baylor with the second to worst odds period, but if you're talking about a combination, this was pretty impressive. Because remember what he said there. Not only did he say Kansas State's going to be there, just point blank, it'll be Kansas State, he also said a team not named OU and Texas will be their opponent, and OU and Texas were number 1 and number 2 in the odds. So it would have been enough to just say Kansas State's going to be in the Big 12 title game. That alone would be enough. But when you add in a nameless, faceless opponent, not named OU or Texas, and I saw that today. Jesse looked at me when I walked in, and well, he looked at me first because the Lions were winning, and then second he looked at me and said, wait till you see what we have on deck today in bold predictions. One thing I thought maybe. I gave this a 9.5, by the way. That's how bold I thought this was. One of those things, maybe. But having them all come together at the same time, I think I said specifically, I was very suspicious of everyone's 2 sleeper teams in the Big 12 just being the same teams. Everybody was labeling Kansas State and TCU as their sleeper teams to watch. And history has shown me when everyone is gravitating towards the same teams as their sleepers, number 1, by definition, they're not sleepers. Number 2, run away and go find the ones they're not talking about. Well, it turns out that the sleeper special was indeed the Big 12 championship game matchup. So good job. I had no way of seeing that coming. Next up, let's go to Columbus, Ohio. Joshua said Ohio State has a top 10 defense in year 1 under Jim Knowles and goes undefeated in the regular season. It doesn't matter if I call Lima, Ohio, that. It will be Lima. And if I call it Lima, it will be Lima. I'm pretty sure it's Lima because I've been there before, but we'll see. Anyway, what about this top 10 defense business? So I said this was a 7, predicting them to be top 10. Because remember, well, you probably don't remember, but I do because I watched the segment again. I just thought they needed to be top 20, and I thought they would be top 20. So, points per game, they ended up 13th. Total yards per game, 11th. Rush yards per game, they were 23rd. Pass yards per game, 14th. So they were in the top 20 range. They weren't in the top 10 range. But here's the fallback. So this ended up being a fairly decent prediction. Here's the fallback, though. It's the Michigan protocol. Games 1 through 11, that's wonderful. But if the Michigan game ends up like it did you really have a top 15 or top 20 defense? Because if you give up 13 points per game, or if you're giving up 19 points per game, but then you give up 45, does the stat really mean much to me? Like if you're giving up 303 yards per game, but they hang 530 on you, does it really matter to me? As an Ohio State fan, does it really matter to me? Because it feels kind of hollow as a statistic. So I thought top 20, that's where they ended up. Unfortunately, that surprisingly mild Saturday afternoon in Columbus a few weeks back, not so much. Next up, let's stay in the Big Ten here. I put a 9.25 on this one. Iowa, this is Nate, by the way. Iowa will win 10 games again and win the Big Ten this year. I said 9.25. I was right. So they ended up being a 7-win team. They did not win the Big Ten because they did not play for the Big Ten title. But they were surprisingly close to playing for the Big Ten title, even at 7-5. They were 5-4 in conference. They had the head-to-head against Purdue. So if they would have finished just one game better, they would have probably ended up, I think, in the Big Ten championship game. Quarterback play was always going to hold them back. That wasn't a surprise. That wasn't a bold prediction during the preseason. It's not bold for me to say that now. That is what held them back. And now we get to see an entirely new era of Iowa offensive football unfold before our eyes with Cade McNamara. But in the meantime, this one I thought was pretty cut and dry. All right, next up. This one got very close. I appreciate the effort here. All right. Justin said Alabama will lose to both Texas teams. That means Texas and Texas A&M. At the time, I made this a 9 on the boldness scale. I don't think it was nearly that bold as it turns out. Bama was favored by over 3 touchdowns in both of these games. One of them without Bryce Young, still favored by over 3 scores. They beat Texas 20-19. They beat A&M 24-20. So they won these games by a combined 5 points, but they did win both of them. And both games ended on the final play. And it's really amazing when you go back and you think about Bama's season, everyone gravitates towards the close loss at Tennessee, the close loss at LSU, and that's fair. But you got to remember, there were some close wins there too that came down to the final play, and these were 2 of them. So that one would have been, you talk about a bold prediction, that if it would have hit and it was close, would have been right up there to me with the whole K-State versus non-OU, non-Texas pick in the Big 12. That was interesting. Bold predictions are only going to get better because we've still got several more chapters to go in the coming weeks.
Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure and leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.